All right, everyone, welcome. I've got a lot to run through today, so I'm going to keep it moving relatively swiftly. If I'm moving too fast, just tell me to slow down because I do talk pretty quick. And if I'm waffling on, Brooke will probably give me one of those and just tell me to hurry up because I tend to do that as well. So when Steve said, why don't we do something about branding, I said, sure, let's call it something like Branding for Business Success. And as I was putting this together, I was thoroughly regretting that as a title, only from the point of view of Rex and I had a conversation just earlier, first time I met Rex, about what is success. Like, success is such a moving goalpost. But I guess for what we're talking about here, it gives us a stick in the sand to sort of say we're all seeking some notion of whatever success is for ourselves and our business. So really, this is how we can use a brand to deliver more or better or different or better service for your clients. So let's make it really interactive. Ask your questions as we go. If I feel like we're slowing down too much, I'll keep it moving along. We do have a couple of little breakout workshop sections. If we've got no time, we'll probably just skip through those, but I'll give you your homework to do in your own time. So without further ado, I guess our structure is essentially a bit of an introduction. Who am I? Who are we? What do we do here? I'll keep that fairly short. There's a lot around what is a brand and what does a brand look like? What does a brand behave like? What are the assets that sort of play into your brand? Our little workshop section in the first half, and then a little bit of breaking down all of these branding terms that get thrown around a lot, and I'll break down as many as I can in the time we've got, and try to help them make sense for your business. We will have a break. We'll have something to eat in the middle. If anyone gets hot, we can dial these heaters off because I can swear I can feel them from here. But it can get cold in here, so we want to make sure. And then we'll go into the second half around a lot around differentiation in the second half, and that's a really crucial factor here. Second workshop and a bit of a case study. So let's roll. So who am I? I guess from a very young age, a very chubby young age it appears, I always wanted to be a graphic designer. It was something that the whole way through my schooling, I didn't know what it was that I wanted to be. I just knew that it entailed a whole bunch of things that I do in my day-to-day work now. So it was communicating with people, it was working creatively through problems. And I think that's the key thing about a graphic designer is we're so much more than just a problem solver. Life, of course, is life, and we do a whole bunch of other things. I'm just making Steve really jealous of my top of Galibier in France there on the bike, but we'll get there one day, won't we?
I just see you away from your kids.
Yeah, well, there's a bit of, it's balance. So, we do a lot of things in our lives, so, it is always trying to balance life with work. My wife will probably tell you I do a pretty terrible job of that at times, but I try pretty hard. But being a business owner, I think was a really big thing for me. I came from a family of my parents ran their own business, and I saw that sense of freedom that they had, and said, it's something that just appeals to me. You don't know when you're signing up for that how many hours a day that equates to. It's pretty much 24/7, where you're always thinking about your business, but you, again, I sort of in a sick way, I sort of enjoy that, including putting this thing together at 1 o'clock this morning or whatever it was. I think all of us here, if we are business owners or if we're working with founders and small businesses, we've all got sort of a shared passion around what it is that you do and why you do what you do. So we started in a little old church in my backyard in 2005. So that church is still there, but we're not. I still live there, but the business is not there. So we had a very small team at the time. It was Nathan started with me from day one. I decided I wanted to start my own business and left my job and found out my wife is pregnant, I think about 3 days later. So that's always a good motivator to get things going. And then I took on an employee from day one as well, mainly because I knew I would go insane in that church on my own. I just don't. I need someone to talk to. So there were a couple of motivators to make sure that this business was a success, and I often like the notion of create a hole and you will fill it, or create an absolute burning need to make money and you will find a way to do it. So we then moved in here in December 2017, and that was part of the whole Prohibition journey. We didn't outgrow the little church, but the Prohibition thing outgrew the shed that was behind the little church. So it did mean that we sort of came to a slightly different spot, but as a studio it is a great place for us to be. I think we're the only design studio in the world in the middle of a gin distillery. It means I can drink Negroni while I'm talking to you, indulge a couple of passions. So, you know, we work with a range of clients. So from, you know, Department of Defence and Space through to small startups to liquor companies, not-for-profits. It's a huge range in there. We do quite a bit in education, health sector. So it is really broad, and that's probably a function of me getting really bored of doing the same thing all the time. So I really like the fact that we have a very rigid client mix, and when you go through tough times like GFCs and pandemics, having a broad client base is a really good way to spread that load. So I'm not going to dwell in this because it's going to take up too much time, but I think anyone that works in this industry has sort of defined processes they work through. These sorts of things make a client feel comfortable that you know what you're doing and you understand the structure behind it. Structure makes everyone, I guess, feel like there's some science to something that is otherwise just completely art. And there is a lot of unknowns in what we do, as Alice knows as well. Like, there's a lot of fear involved in what we do. So our job is to make people feel comfortable. So process helps do that. And, you know, defining, having processes for defining what your business is all about. So going from positioning through to finding the core essence of a brand down to that brand story, internal and external stakeholders. Some of that text might be a little hard to read from this angle, but I'll talk through it. So brand touchpoints is a really important thing. So we're not just designing a brand for a singular presentation. It's you know, everything from digital to sound, to what people say on the phone, to how your proposals present, to physical realm, to sort of printed matter. So it's making sure that when you are creating a brand, you're mindful of all of these things and how they're all going to work. So what is a brand? I'm going to skip through this relatively quickly, but it just gives us a feel around what people attribute to different brands and what is important for them. So some of these are really, really common and very well-known brands, and the fact that, you know, Michael Beirut from Pentagram went through a rebrand of this brand, MasterCard, obviously, back only a year or so ago. And they realised that the brand was so strong that it could present that simply. So it was a huge exercise in restraint, and it did allow them a lot of possibility in the way they presented it going forward. So the simpler it is, the easier it is to present. Nike logo, famously designed for $35 by a student at the time. Phil Bowerman accepted that logo as the worst of a bad bunch, essentially, the best of a bad bunch, and said, you know, you've earned your $35, I guess. We'll see how that goes. I think he did give her some shares in the company down the track, equivalent to quite a lot of money eventually, when he worked out that this is one of the most valuable brands in the world, and they've barely had to change it since that day. So quite remarkable story. And this one is one that I've always loved. A lot of people think this was designed for the Australian wool industry. It was designed for the international wool industry. It was an Italian designer back in 1964, and it's never changed since. A good logo does stand the test of time, but it needs that strength of an idea behind it. Is it a colour? It's Pantone 2865. Tell me what brand that's for. Yes. So they famously lost a court case only recently, 24-year court case, to own that colour, which was completely unownable. The funny thing was they already owned it. So they had it trademarked in 1995. They wanted to extend that trademark, and then the whole thing got rejected. So it shows that you should be careful about what you wish for. But colour is a huge thing. So I could talk all day about colour and what it represents for a brand and what it does for anything from trustworthiness in your blues through to vibrancy and personality in your purples, through to that sort of spark of fun and vibrancy that you have in your yellows. Colour psychology comes massively into it, and if you want to own a colour, then you've got to do a lot of work to make sure that you're presenting the brand very consistently around it. This one, I didn't want to run music, but you can pretty much, a lot of these you'll be able to get straight away. So lucky you're with Amy, obviously. Oh, what a feeling. That one was a bit trickier. If you're a bit older, you might know that one. So it was more smart, more safe, more teen. Thank you, yes. If you're young, you definitely won't get this. I road tested this with my young designers, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I feel like they really missed that one. Okay, so sometimes it's a feeling that we work with. Like a brand like Lego absolutely nails that, like that emotional connection with what it's about, and it's so much more than just those little pieces. Apple always do it well, so I will pop up a few times talking about Apple. And old Mickey Mouse there. So consistency can be a huge part of what your brand is about, and this is if you're a designer, we love geeking out on style guides, and the NASA style guide was one of the most famous style guides in the world, created in the mid-1960s again, and is just an absolute icon of brand style guides. You have to be a designer to enjoy this stuff as much as we do, but it just everything is thought through, and it is a real strength for a brand to have that degree of consistency in a document. So a brand like this one, Australian brand created by Kabi Tuckwell, designer in Sydney. His business partner Dare Jennings was a founder of Mambo, so he just sold out of Mambo, and they were starting a motorcycle company. So this was a motorcycle company that makes less motorcycles than probably any other motorcycle company in the world. It really was a fashion brand that they were creating. So they launched with almost as many logos as you see there. So the notion that a logo has to be one thing, it has to be set in stone, it has to be fixed. Can you guys see that all right? Do you want me to angle this around a bit? You're good. Is completely debunked by a brand like this, and they kept going. Like the whole brand is about re-evolving, but you still always know that it's connected to the brand. So there's a level of genius there around the language that they use and the way they present it. And as a fashion brand, it's literally just writes its own check. One that we've done here at Toolbox for a council client of ours. So Prospect Road before it was just starting to hit its straps. So they knew they had a cinema coming, and they knew they, for the first time in 40 years, Prospect Road was actually going to have something worth visiting. So they said, and I live there, so I'm allowed to say that. So they said to us, right, how are we going to communicate this to people? And I said, well, it's had a pretty bad rap, like for a long time. So we need people to sort of reinvestigate it. So we came up with the tagline for them, discover more. And then that drove this whole philosophy of a brand. I've talked about brands that can change, where we've got the symbol, which is this little P, which is obviously a place marker, but it really is just a vehicle to showcase things that you can discover within the city of Prospect. So this notion of a brand that can change for them, and look, there's been very few touch points of that brand, and it's working really well for them. It's a really simple philosophy. One of my favourite designers in the world, who's no longer with us, Paul Rand, had the best process of any designer I've ever known, and more balls than anyone I've ever known. So he had this process that was, you work with my process or go and see someone else. So the process was very simple. It was, you give me a brief, I'm going to go away for months and months, and I'm going to come back with one logo. I'm going to come back with one logo and a 100-page brand style guide, and an invoice for $100,000 in the 70s. It's a shitload of money. And you will love it. And he almost never failed. The few clients that didn't like the logo, he literally just sent them away and said, you don't know what you're talking about. Come back and see me when you do, and I'll get this thing live for you. The brands that he created are just absolute, global powerhouses. So Westinghouse to this day has barely changed that logo. We're talking back in that was 60s, I think. ABC, UPS has evolved since then, but it really hasn't changed in the spirit of the way it works. Sometimes the design process can be completely opposite to what you expect it to be, but if the designer gets what they're doing, then you have to have confidence that they're actually going to come out with the outcome or go elsewhere. I love this one. Steve used this one so I thought I'll just weave that straight into the presentation because it is such a strong example of the fact that a brand can be stronger than the business that it represents. So, it's stronger than the industry that it represents in this sense. So no one saw that coming, obviously, when they created that. But, you've got icons of design that, again, Sony, strangely enough, still make Walkman. It wasn't until I did a search for it they worked out they still make them. Probably the biggest stuffing up of owning an industry in almost in history, in the sense that they let Apple grab something that they owned, holus bolus, and take it so far that they are just nothing but obscure anymore. But it is an icon. It was awesome. It was just everyone had to have one of those. So again, and that is a brand living through a product. Pan Am, I didn't realise had gone out of business at some point in history. It's one of those brands that for me seemed like it would always be there. Okay, so what is a brand? It is defined by your customer's perception of what your business is. I chose the words of a smarter person than me. So Jeff Bezos from Amazon says your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, and it's probably the best expression for me of what a brand is about. It's sending something out to the world that you then have no control over. You are at the mercy of your audience to make up their mind about what your brand is about, and that is actually what your brand is about. It's not what you think it's about. So it is a really important exercise in understanding the fact that your reputation is on the line, and you can only do so much, but then you've got to do it well enough and repeat that exercise often enough that it resonates with your clients. So I've got a little video here. I'm just going to adjust our volume from the last video. It was super loud. This one's super quiet.
Here's to the crazy, the rebels,
Sorry for the quality.
troublers, the ones who see things differently. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy, who think they can change the world, are the ones who do.
So what's important about that as a piece of branding was few people sort of know now back to that point. 1999, Apple, when they created that ad, were 90 days from going out of business. So they had 90 days worth of money left in the kitty, and they were toast. So they were completely at a crossroads of we've either got to go down fighting, or we're literally just going to go down. So what they did was this quite sort of revolutionary way of saying, okay, well, what is it that we actually do? And it's not sell computers. So if we can get to the core of what we are as a brand, and we can sell that to people, then we can make them believe what we believe, and we can build up from there. So a year after that, they released the iMac, which was a real deal changer for them. And it's obviously been, you know the trajectory since then. But it was that campaign that actually turned everything. And that whole notion of think different is still pervades their brand philosophy these days. Funnily, that was what I had on my pantry door, which I drew in chalk at the time that I started Prohibition, and I never really thought about it until I looked at that video and then went back and went, hang on a minute, I did something with that at some point. And the timing was, it was something that I philosophically believed in. Whether it had any influence on what I did is another thing, but it does show something towards a mindset. Okay, let's have a little bit of a break. What we're going to do is just a little exercise in thinking about, I think what we're going to talk about today only has relevance if it gives some value to you and your own brand. So take a small amount of time, because we probably don't have huge amounts of time, to think about what assets sit within your current brand that you work with, good, bad or otherwise, and what do you feel are the ones that people actually would recognise or attach themselves to. And then we'll talk about the fact that are they distinctive. So just jot a couple of things down on paper. We'll have a little chat about it. We can just sort of break into a couple of groups and have a little chat. I'm ready to move on when you're ready to move on. If we don't feel like doing it at all, just raise your hand and say, yeah, that feels like a waste of my time. But I do feel like it's good to reflect on your own businesses and your own brands, and it might even be something that you don't do or you don't use that you could. And that's ideally what this whole process is about. It's about thinking about your own company, your own brand, from an outsider's perspective. If you're not you, if you are your customer and they see your logo, your brand, your presentation, your people, your tone of voice on a daily basis, what do you think that they would resonate with? And sometimes you'll jot that down and you go, holy crap, I need to be doing that better. Or I've got things here I can work with that I can move on. Some really robust discussions here, and sometimes it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's we're confirming that we're doing things right, which is great. But also unearthing opportunities. Sometimes we've done a rebrand a little while ago, and there's opportunities we were talking about moving forward into sort of that next phase of how we can then step that up again, or going through a rebrand process currently and reaffirming that we're doing these things for the right reasons. And we're going to talk about that in a bit more depth. So, here we go. So, brand is if we could do away with the word brand, it would be wonderful, because it is one of the most overused brands. So we're going to go through a whole host of these different things that just confuse everyone. And I'm not going to be able to shed light on all of them, because that would be literally an all-day or two-day exercise. But brand personality, brand associations, brand archetypes. A lot of these things are very important to have a handle on, but if you tried to constantly manage all of them, you're probably going to not get any work done, put it that way. Brand promise is really important. Your brand benefits you need to understand. Your brand position you need to create but also reinforce. Your brand assets is what you're working with every day. Your brand purpose is something that if you don't have it, you need one. Your brand voice is the way you're communicating. Your brand pillars are important things to have, but you can tackle that in multiple ways. I'll talk about that in a minute. A brand story is a really good sort of narrative device. Brand values for me are one of the most important things you could have. Brand attributes, again, comes down to those day-to-day things, and brand guidelines, if you don't have them, you really should, because it's as much for you as it is for all of your external stakeholders. So, brand position. I'm not going to death by PowerPoint this thing, but I'm going to sort of hit a couple of the key points. So, it is what you do. It embodies your unique values, your differentiation. It is what the customer gains by using your product and service. All of these things come together in the notion of a brand position. Everyone, whether they think they have a brand position or not, has a brand position. It is what you do, who you do it for, what makes you different. If you don't have a USP, then we're probably all in a bit of trouble But it is that whole notion of how your brand sits in the market.
Adam,
Yes.
what's your brand position?
Around
Your brand toolbox.
around toolbox. So for us, we position ourselves as experts in what we do. So we have a market that sits in that scale space that works for us in terms of sort of startup through to small SME, because that's our skill set. In terms of what we do,
Most of the logos you had were larger companies.
some of them are. Yes, I still treat those as SMEs really. Even Defence SA seems like this big massive entity. Defence SA is not the Defence Force as an organisation. It's actually relatively small. They do a lot, but they're quite small. So for us, it's all about creating differentiation and a brand asset for our clients. So it's about understanding your business and it's delivering your story to your customers. So I probably have that defined somewhere much more eloquently than that, but I've just completely paraphrased the crap out of it. So Nike, and I'm not going to dwell too much on these because I've got lots to run through, but Nike, for example, high quality, fashionable, top performing sports apparel, quality materials, advanced in the way they behave, commitment to innovation and investment in technology. Now, all of these things mean that you cannot then sort of start falling behind in terms of, we've done our bit now, we're not going to innovate anymore. Lots of people buy our sneakers and our sportswear, we're good. Now, bear in mind, this is not what defines them as a brand. What defines them as a brand is the fact that they turn everyday people into high-performance sports people, because everyone is a sports person in Nike's brand, in Nike's opinion. So that's more into their brand philosophy. But this is the nuts and bolts of understanding of what you do as a business and the core of what makes your product different. So, like I said, I'll keep moving, but we will keep these questions going. So, brand promise. So, this is the one that if you're not living and breathing your brand promise, then you're in all sorts of trouble. So, essentially, everything you do needs to be questioned back against that brand promise. And again, I'll give you an example just so that we can sort of road test it, pardon the pun when you see the example. So, it's if you put your brand promise out there, people are going to expect you to deliver on it, and you need to. So, our example. So for these guys, if you're going to refer to yourself as the ultimate driving machine, you really have to deliver on that. So you can see that when you make a promise like that people are going to expect performance out of everything you do. So it does set a benchmark for what you're about, and it sets an expectation in the mind of your consumer. So as soon as you don't deliver on that, you are in trouble. But it's what drives people to a business. Brand personality. I really like this one because anything that you can humanise is going to emotionally attach to someone. An emotional attachment is going to get you a lot further than trying to tell everyone all day long what you do and what you're about, and I'll get into why stuff in a little while. So, your brand personality is those human characteristics that you convey. It is to appeal and to resonate with your audience, familiarity, and it is about that human connection. So the examples is a pretty it's a pretty obvious one, I think, but it's a really good one. So, these guys, you only need to see that box to know what I'm talking about. If you haven't bought any for your wife lately, then maybe you should. So, these guys, they're a great example of owning a colour as well, that very particular bluish green. But that whole brand for them is about sophistication. Everything they do is about sophistication. So that is that whole persona that they're delivering. So brand pillars, I won't go into this in great depth because I do think they're an important thing, but I think there's something that you can tick off in multiple ways. So essentially, again, I'm going to keep coming back to differentiation. Sorry if I keep standing in front of the screen. I wander around a bit. So I thought the best way to explain brand pillars was to give brand pillars their own brand pillars. So if brand pillars had brand pillars, they would be differentiation that I spoke about, relevance, esteem, and experience. So if your brand pillars tick off those 4 things, there's a pretty good chance you're fairly rounded in the way you're delivering it. And so, what makes us different summed up in one word or one of those key brand pillars? Relevance is all about what you're doing for your customer and the fact that you understand your customer and you're delivering something that's of need to them. And it's really important to understand that relevance, because as soon as you are irrelevant, you're in all sorts of bother. Esteem is it's a little bit inward looking. It's saying we're very good at what we do and we're happy to say that. Okay, now I'm going to have to skip even faster. This one's an easy one to skip through. Essentially, your brand associations or your brand assets are all those touch points of that brand. So it's all those physical artifacts that your brand touches its way to. But it is, as we talked earlier, it's more than just your logo, your fonts, your colours, your tagline, the rest of it. It is all those other touch points, whether it be sound, people, the tone of voice. All of those things come down to associations or assets. So, brand values. I'm going to coin an example of ours for this one because relevance helps. So I think brand values are some of the most important things you should have. So if a client says to me, we don't have the wherewithal to go through this exhaustive process of what we need to, an entire brand strategy thing that can take days and days and weeks and lots of work. At the very least, you need a set of brand values. So they're those things that you're living and breathing by. They're the things that keep you on track. So when you are creating something new or communicating on a new medium, you question the way you're behaving or what you're doing against those values. But they're really good staff things as well. So for Prohibition, these are the set of brand values we came up with. So it was deluxe quality. Everything we do is about. We one of the most expensive gyms in Australia when we launched. Everything we do has to be about that quality, and it is that sort of next level. We sort of sit in that super premium bracket, but it's something that staff have to understand, and all of us have to live and breathe that level of quality. Authentic craft. So we're a craft brand, but everything we do sits in that craft spectrum. So the way that we make the spirit, the way we hand bottle everything, the way that that sort of hand craftsmanship comes into everything that we do, and authenticity for us is crucial, because there's a lot of players in craft gin that aren't particularly authentic about it, and that becomes a differentiator in your own space. So absolute passion. I mean, if anyone ever meets Wes or I, that's the one word that sort of sums up what we're about. I'm talking about Toolbox today, but if I'm talking about Prohibition, I'm even more passionate, because probably I've had a couple of gins as well. And infectious fun. Don't underestimate fun as a brand value. Like, some people take themselves way too seriously, and people are attracted to a brand that feels like they're having more fun than everyone else. And if you see us at a gin festival, we definitely are. Probably are more drunk again, but we are having more fun. So, brand personality. There's a few of these I will skip through that we've got examples that we've done for Prohibition again. So this one, I have a tool called the Brand Deck. It's a deck of cards that is like a yin and yang of a whole different facets of the personality of what your business may or may not be about. And it's a really good exercise to run through, because you very quickly identify what you're not, and there's some really hard decisions about, are we this or are we that? And then out of 52 cards, you've then got to come back to the 6 values or personality traits that do embody your brand. So funnily enough, fun was in there again. Crafted was in there again. Authentic was in there again. Just happened that they were on these cards anyway, which is handy. Bold, and I'll talk about bold, time and time again. And timeless was a thing. Timeless is not really a thing ever in branding. But when we're communicating something that is 100 years ago and making it relevant now, there is a sense of timelessness. This one's an interesting one. It comes back from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's very, very much a psychology-based thing. So it can be an exercise that's worth going through for your brand or your company. And it's all about starting from the base needs as a human being, those functional needs. So it is, depending on where your brand sits or what space you work within, those functional needs could be about time, they could be about sensory appeal, quality sits in there, reduce costs. They're really sort of base requirements of someone in their day-to-day life or in their business if you're a B2B company. Our goal is to move up towards essentially towards transcendence. It all becomes quite esoteric the higher you go up. So then we get into emotional needs. Emotional needs are crucial ones if you're going to tie to someone as a brand. So our brand or service or product reduces anxiety, or it creates nostalgia. It has design aesthetic to it. It has attractiveness. It has a therapeutic value or wellness value. What is it that your brand does? The more of these things that you can attribute to your brand, the more you've got to work with and the better chance of actually attracting a customer. Having said that, some brands might only have 3 or 4, but they're really, really good at them. So then life-changing benefits, we're really starting to get up to the lofty stuff now. So providing hope, self-actualization, motivation. Heirloom was one that you see that some highlighted in black. There's some that we picked out for Prohibition. I'll highlight those in a minute. And affiliation and belonging. So it's not until you highlight these things that you say, hang on a minute, there's opportunities that sit within these things. And the goal of every brand is to help people achieve self-transcendence. If you can do that, you're doing bloody well. Steve, we're a little bit self-important, so we thought the gin might be able to achieve a bit of self-transcendence, but we stopped at affirmation. So, Heirloom says to us, why don't we create a product that is like a $500 bottle of gin that no one's ever going to drink, but it is that heirloom product that sits at the top of the range that is incredibly valuable as a thing, but it's a keepsake that someone wants to hang on to. Now, we've never done that because it's way too, I don't know, we're too humble, but we do have a product that sits up there that people buy the gin and they won't drink it because it sits on the shelf and it looks too good. But then, moving through, emotional, nostalgia, design aesthetics, obviously, fun comes up again, attractiveness, and then down to these functional benefits. So connection, quality, variety, sensory appeal, information is what we're all about here. So all these things are part of touch points of that brand. So that Maslow's method or structure is an interesting one to go through. And there's a whole lot of stuff that comes off there as things that we can do to highlight any of those. I'll go through this one pretty quick too. So a wheel of emotion. So Plutchik's wheel of emotion is all about how you can emotionally connect with a customer. And we've highlighted for us as a brand a few that we felt that were quite telling in the way that we behave as a brand. So love, so in our case it's love for the craft, the flavour and good times. Acceptance, the sense of belonging driven by the ethos. Joy, 30 meals at a time. If someone says to me, what do I do for a job? I say I bring joy 30 meals at a time. That sort of lofty notion of what we can be about. Interest in wisdom and shared knowledge. So when people come here, they want to learn things. They want to know things. Admiration of what goes into the product, and ideally awe of what we can do in craft spirits in Australia. So your company, you're going to be able to look at those emotional connections and say, how can we connect with our clients through this range of emotions? So there's a whole exercise in doing that. I should credit Greg Kavanagh from Branded Culture, a really good mate of mine. It's really good when you're so close to your own brand to bring in someone external, even if you're a designer, to bring in someone who understands strategy as well or better than you do, and let them have a fresh set of eyes on your brand. So we went through that process with Greg, and Greg helped us come up with those set of things. So again, he was stopping arguments between us because we're like, no, with this, no, with that. But it is that external mediator helps. So how do we stand out in the crowd? Seems pretty obvious, doesn't it, being different? But it's amazing how often someone comes to us and we say, right, what do you do that's different to everyone else? They say, we're in an industry where everyone's the same. And that's where we sort of start drilling down and saying, well, that's not true. We just need to find what it is that is actually different about what you do. So what is differentiation? It is what separates you apart from your competitors. It is, importantly, it's what your client sees your point of difference. It's not what you see as your point of difference, it's what your client sees as your point of difference. How we're going to communicate them, and really importantly, why should anyone care? So just because you care doesn't mean that anyone else should care about what it is you've got to say about your own business. So discover your purpose. This is an interesting exercise as a person as much as it is as a brand, discovering what your purpose is and what it is that you could and should and do offer. So the purpose is crucial, and it is this notion of what gets you out of bed in the morning, sends you to work, other than the paycheck. Doesn't always come. So you've probably all heard and seen Simon Sinek and his Start With Why. If you haven't, you should. Simon Sinek's been around long enough that there's almost as much downplaying what he's about as there is affirmating what he says. But there is so much in there that is of benefit that if you haven't watched his video, I think it's had, when I looked at again last night, I think it was 55 million views on YouTube. It is pretty crucial stuff in terms of getting to the core of what's going to make someone emotionally attached to your business and what you do. So his notion is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So therefore the goal is not to do business with everyone that needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Now, it's not until you sort of really pull that apart and think about it that you look through your client list and you say, the clients that give me the most grief are actually the ones that don't believe what I believe. And the clients that we make the most margin from, or we have the best relationships from, or respect us the most, are the ones that believe what we believe. And there's a very good chance that what attracted them to your business was why you do what you do, not what you do. So the clients that come to you off what you do are going to be all about price and that direct fee for service. It's not about the value add that you deliver. It's not about the expertise that you have. It's about, I need this thing, it's worth X to me, so can you do it for me? And then I'm in, I'm out, I'm gone, and it's very transactional. Whereas if you're working on a why basis and you're selling on a why basis, then that emotional connection is there and people get you. I've got a little example that he does in his video, which is a really good one. Again, how many people have seen that video? Yeah. So I was hoping that everyone in the room would have seen it. I'm sort of glad that you haven't, because this is not going to be highly repetitive. But because there's a reason it's had 55 million views on YouTube, because it is incredibly good content. So it's a TED Talk. They could, I'm sure if they knew it was going to get 55 million views on YouTube, they would have recorded it better. They would have done the sound quality better. But hey, it's there in its form. So his example of starting with why is that if Apple, and I'm going to come back to Apple because they are ridiculously good at what they do, if they behave like every other company in their industry, they would say, we make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use and user-friendly. Do you want to buy one? So the answer to that is, you've got a point, but let me think about it, What Apple actually do is they start with why. Everything we do, we believe in thinking differently and challenging the status quo. We do this by making computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Do you want to buy one? So that notion of starting with what it is that they want to do as a brand and why they exist emotionally connects with you, and the decision making happens at that point. It goes into this whole pseudoscience about the fact that decision making is done in the limbic brain, not the frontal cortex. So the frontal cortex or the neocortex is what helps you understand complex information and what everything is about. But the way the human brain is wired is that part of your brain cannot make a decision. So all decisions are made by the emotional part of the brain. So if you want someone to buy something and you tell them a whole bunch of facts and figures, how are you going to get to that part of the brain that's actually going to make them feel comfortable and make that decision? Yes. So if you sell on that emotional level, you're connecting with the part of the brain that has feeling. It controls behaviour, but most importantly controls decision making. So again, there's lots of people out there saying, yeah, that's the most bullshit bit of science ever, but on a common sense level, it does make sense. It does make sense that if you emotionally connect with someone, then they are going to be the sort of customer that you want to work with on a regular basis. People that come to the zoo because they love the zoo and they love why you're there as a thing, are going to come back and back and back. They're going to bring their kids and their grandkids. People that come to the zoo because, they've got Wang Wang and Fooney, and they've got a baby giraffe. Did you say baby giraffe? Yeah, that's cool. That's emotional. Zoo's a bad example because the what is really emotionally driving, so that's good for me. But you can see that as a notion, this notion of why is really important to understand. So I'm going to make you work through your break, if that's okay. You don't have to. You're allowed to clock off and just eat something. But because we've got a lot to do,
I've got a question.
Yeah.
With the zoo,
Yeah.
I'm going because of that. I'm going because I love my grandchild. I'm going to take them to somewhere that I know they're going to love. So I'm going to take them there because I used to love it when I was a child. So which connection is driving me?
I would argue in some degrees all of them. Yeah. But you're not just going for the giraffe.
No.
Because the giraffe might not be there. He might be having a day off.
Sleep for sure.
He's snoozing. The lion is out the back doing what he does, doing what lions do. You can't guarantee the lion's going to be there, but you know the overall experience and the feeling that you had when you were there made you feel good, and you want to impart that with your grandchild. So yes, it's very much the why, not the what. I think about a zoo.
When you buy a membership, so when the line is not there, you can get it.
Boom. Boom. That's the what. Finish with the what. Perfect. Exactly, right. The funny thing is, Simon Sinek may not be the font of all knowledge, but if Nietzsche agrees with him, then we're going somewhere. So Friedrich Nietzsche said, he who has a why can endure any how. So I sort of like that as a reason for why. So, feel free to please stop, have something to eat, drink your coffees. I'm going to probably top up my Negroni. If you've never thought about this notion of why, this should be a little bit of a mind opener for you. The question is then how you use that why, but the how you use it should be really clear from there. So, building a brand beyond a logo. So, we work with a range of clients, and sometimes locking down to one logo can be a real challenge. This particular client we were dealing with the council, and they couldn't agree on even a name for the program. So I said, I need something to work with here, don't you? And they said, well, we think it's Network Prospect, but we, it could be Connect Prospect, or it could be a whole range of things. Like, now what? What do we do? And I said, well, we could build a brand. I'm just manually flipping back through an automated thing. We could build a brand around the fact that it does constantly change. And I've just got to go and find a whole bunch of words now with O's that I can connect to my brand device. So when we did that, and we knew that this brand would live in a primarily digital environment, so that's a clincher. Like, you have to know your application. Whereas if we were constantly working with print mediums, and they only had a couple of touch points, it doesn't work. The whole thing falls in a heap. So you have to know your applications before you can suggest something that is a little crazy. And they're a council, so they're incredibly conservative, but that wasn't a conservative outcome. So building a brand beyond the logo. So these guys, for example, came to us, good mates now, but I didn't know them from a bar of soap to start with. They opened a place called the Bond Store in Wallaroo. If you haven't been to Wallaroo lately, you should. And if you haven't been to the Bond Store, you really should. So it's a really great spot. It's the old Bond Store, funnily enough, in Wallaroo. And they've spent a bomb on the place. They've got a brewery at ground level, and they've got a distillery underground in the basement level. They had these amazing products and no labelling. So they had this range of gins that you could purchase that had a little swing tag with a price tag on it, and maybe the name of the product if you were lucky. And that was how they were trying to sell gin from their cellar door, from their tasting room. So the first thing we said to them is, right, okay, what have you got? And they had a logo. We changed it a little bit because we took some license. But they had a logo and they had very little else. And they'd done what a lot of people do with the logo, is they just pick up the logo and put it verbatim on everything. So we knew that we needed more than that to create a system of labelling for them. But they also came to us and said, all right, so you've got a gin, right, you making any other products? Yeah, we've got 9. Okay, great. And they're all different colours and they're all different this and different that. Some are gin, some are vodka, some are liqueurs, native ingredients, straight down the line, London Dry, this whole plethora of stuff. So that's where we said to them, right, okay, now we know the problem, we can sort of start setting about a solution. And what we did was really just take the tiniest little element out of that brand, that sprig of wheat, and work with that seed as sort of the driver for the packaging as a range, and then rolling now into beers and a whole bunch of other things. But it is that sort of thing that just because all you've got is a logo, and maybe there's nothing particularly wrong with the logo, that doesn't mean that you've got a brand that's actually going to work and engage your consumer and do all the things it needs to do. Funny one, you think City of Adelaide have a logo and they have a brand, like what are we going to do with City of Adelaide? So they came to us and they said, we've got this thing called Adelaide Design for Life. And I said, yeah, I know, it's really good. And they said, it is, and it's failing dismally. Like, it's just not resonating with anyone. So we said to them, it's a nice notion, but it needs to be delivered in a way that people understand it and what it's all about. So we worked with Greg Kavanagh again, funnily enough, to go through a whole brand strategy process with them so they could understand their own brand and what it was even about. They just had this sort of notional title that didn't have any real life to it. So our job was then to take all of that stuff. Now, this document is full of a whole bunch of really weighty information about how we work with the brand and what it's about and what its ethos is and all of these things. And the audience was all the people that bring events with lots of people in them to Adelaide. So it was to get outside of Adelaide, to send to the Convention Bureau and all these people that will attract people to Adelaide. And we went and engaged a whole bunch of bloggers that take beautiful photos and negotiated with them to take their Instagram content and with their Insta handles, with their permissions, to use that to actually sell Adelaide. So most of these shots are not actually shot by technically professional photographers that we send out to shoot stuff. They're people that just take the beautiful photos of Adelaide and believe in Adelaide. Ambra, likewise, so they had a logo and they had an amazing business, and I could talk about Ambra for a really long time. If you haven't been down to Theberton, you must try their place. It looks a lot like this. So they were trying to take on Aperol in the spritz market, and I said, you've got it up against you, but it's a fucking huge market, so let's give it a go. So the notion was this sort of concept of, everyone loves the spritz, it's time you refresh it, and refresh it with a local product. So, and we serve them like dime a dozen out here, a spritz made with their blood orange liqueur and our gin. So it was taking this brand and extending it further and showing how we can bring the experience to life in their tasting room, their cellar door. Our little friend Sophia here that only does 25 kilometres an hour, and they take her to events like this. And Pepe, one of the owners, is a really big dude, and when you see him inside this thing like this, it is hilarious. But it opens up as a fully functional bar, which is really cool. So, does the brand need to evolve? This all seems very generic and run of the mill, but brands evolve. They do. And when people say the prime example, when someone says to you, "I don't need to change my logo," Coca-Cola have never changed their logo in 100 years. Well, they have, and they do. It's just that you don't notice it. And Pepsi do it even more. There's so many iterations, and McDonald's changed their logo, and again, you don't notice it. So all of these things are, there's reasons for evolving and changing, a rebrand can have a really strong purpose. It's not always just because our logo's a bit tired. It's time to refresh. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's this line here. It's the fact that it's the biggest opportunity that you may have to show that something has changed fundamentally within your company or organisation is a rebrand. So people say, hang on a minute, something's changed. I don't know what, but they wouldn't have done all of this if something hadn't changed internally. So it's a really good flag or post to sign that things have changed. So, sometimes because you're outdated, sometimes it's differentiation, a lot of times it's differentiation, I'll show that in a minute. You're not attracting the right buyers. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and there is a difference between a rebrand and a reposition. So the rebrand is that sign I was talking about, that something's changed for the better. So you would see it as a structural change. So something else has changed in the organisation other than just a logo, or probably you wouldn't have come to us in the first place, or another designer, or an agency. A repositioning, on the other hand, is often just to bring something up to date. So it's someone will come to us and say, look, the symbols working, the typography needs updating, but the way the rest of the brand presents needs a whole overhaul, and that's a repositioning. So this is a really simple example from a client that we've had previously. So they came to us as Street and Park Furniture, and we'd been working with them for quite a long time as Street and Park Furniture. And they said, we're really struggling with differentiation. Our competitors, Park and Garden Furniture, Street Furniture Australia, Street and Garden Furniture, and there were 12 of them and all sound the same. We just can't seem to find any differentiation from them. And we really want to change the model of our company to be a design-forward and design-focused company. So immediately we said, right, alarm bells, rebrand. And he's like, holy shit, this is a 30-year-old company. I can't just throw out my brand and start again. We said, well, you can, and you probably should. So we went through a process with them. The funny thing was, we never actually threw out Street and Park, we just shortened it. So Spark was part of Street and Park, and it really focused on that notion of that design forwardness, that spark of thinking that says that our stuff is different and it's special. They do, council landscape furniture all over Australia, and So it was an opportunity for us with documents to sort of promote that something was different. These sorts of things that are quite iconic out in the environment, but they're a company that no one knew about. So, you've interacted with this furniture every day. You just don't know, who makes it. There's always someone, and they've done almost every piece of street furniture around everywhere, all over Australia. So they said to us, right, how are we going to launch this thing, and how are we going to stay, how are we going to raise some attention? I said, well, who's your client? They're landscape architects, they're architects, they're designers, they're project managers, people that get into the nitty gritties of what this stuff's all about. So they work with high tech engineering. So we laser cut out of a very thin piece of MDF that fit in a DL envelope like any other letter that you would receive that says, hey, we've changed our brand and our name. But then you push this little park bench, which is one of their park benches actually. You push it out and build it up and sit it on your desk, and I've still got one sitting on my desk. So that whole notion of front of mind is what that was about. So a rebrand creates an opportunity to present yourself differently to a client. What is success? Success is different for all different people. So, we'd all be pretty happy if we were rolling around like that, wouldn't we? That somewhat successful. Probably hasn't left the ground for a little while, that one. But the fact is, with success, it's different for every business. And I alluded to this at the start. It was the worst title for a presentation ever. What does it look like in 5 years from now? Around that notion of, if you don't know why you do what you do, how you're going to sell it to other people, if you don't know what success looks like in the future, how are you going to aim for it? So it is a really important notion to understand what success might be. So for some of our clients, it's about huge growth, and for others of our clients, it's, I only want to find 2 more clients, because a client for me is a huge deal and I only need a few of them. So it's a completely different approach to how you work with that notion of success as an outcome. If we drove those clients too many customers of their own, they'd be stuffed. They wouldn't be able to handle it. Now, I'm using Prohibition as a case study, not as an example of success, because I'll talk about, again, the notion of success in a minute. But it's a case study that I can tell you all the inner workings of, and I'll do it as fast as I can because we're getting tight on time. If you want to ask questions through the way, just ask questions. So Wes comes to me one day and says, his mum Mary died of cancer, and she was a big gin drinker, and we were sitting down drinking a gin and tonic, and he said we should make gin. And I must have had a couple of gin and tonics. I said, sounds like a great idea. So I went home and I said to my wife, Kate, we're going to make gin. And she said, what are you 2 idiots know about making gin? And I said, nothing at all. But that's the fun part. So that's why our still's called Mary. Mary's just had a polish up this morning just for you guys. So she looks nice and pretty today. So this is how we started. So this is my garage at home. That was the entirety of Prohibition, was that shelf. So, and that bench there where we pumped a bit of stuff into a bottle and put some labels on. So this is my garage that sits out behind that church, in Oakingham, just out of the city. We look young and enthusiastic with more hair and less bags under our eyes. We didn't know what was coming, but it was funny. We took that photo, it felt like total idiots, and I only just found that photo for this presentation. I went, that sort of summed up that stupid enthusiasm we had back then. But it literally, that was the totality of the operation. So then as we grew, we had to be really crafty. If we were going to do events, I had to build a bar that would fit in my Volvo. Still have that bar. You've seen that bar.
Can I point out something that I think a really important point in looking back to it?
Hair?
The fact that at what stage did you make the brand?
Yeah, really good point. So yeah, really good point. So you come out with this notion of we're going to make gin, and then you go through the exercise of trying to work out how we're going to make gin, and you work out that you can't buy a still unless you know how to use it. But how do you learn how to use it? Because the ATO won't let you. But how do you learn how to use it if you don't have a still? So we had this real chicken and egg scenario. So we went and saw Brendan Carter up at Applewood Distillery and said, we want to make gin, rah, rah, rah. And he said, I've got a still here, I've got extra capacity, you seem like a cool couple of dudes that I could work with, why don't I make some gin for you? And I went, and he said, what's your brand going to present like? And I went, it's going to look like that. And he goes, great, well we can do this and we can do this and we do that. So the fact that he was asking me questions about how we were presenting as a brand to be able to make a spirit for it, I immediately knew he was the right person. And all of a sudden this business model, we had no idea when we could go to market, and we knew it was going to become competitive. We could be in market like a year faster. So we immediately said, let's do this thing, sign us up, let's make a recipe, let's do all of that. So we, for the first 2 years, we were bottling gin by hand in my backyard. And then we still weren't making gin ourselves at that point. We moved in here in 2017. I should probably keep the story. I'll just pepper that through the rest of the... Yeah, cool. Thank you, Steve. So, yeah, it was rethinking the notion of to be a distiller, do you have to distill? Or do we build a business first, work out what it is that we need in terms of the capacity to make the stuff, and then build to that, which is what we did do. If we'd have bought a still in day one, it would have looked nothing like that, and it would have given us all sorts of trouble. So building a bar to fit in the back of my Volvo, which went to lots and lots of events. This is us drinking a lot. You'll probably see that regularly. So this is the first time we ever walked into a bar to sell our product, and I didn't realise I'd taken these photos either until I was looking for this. So you go through the exercise of designing something. You're designing a bottle. You're designing the labelling. You're designing the outer packaging. You're designing a spirit. You're working out how you're going to get all these things together. We had a goal of the 1st of December to have it to market. We got the booze in a bottle, 1st of December, stuck a box under our arm, and then went, now what? Like, how do you do this? Like, we're not booze sellers. So we walked into Marcus at Haynes & Co. because we knew if anyone was going to bust our balls about the product not being good enough, it would be him. So we picked the hardest ass in Adelaide to walk into. So Marcus tried the spirit, took a couple of steps back, looked at us and said, this is really good. And we went, well, we hoped it was. No one else has tried it. We liked it. And he said, no, it's really good. And he said to the boys, right, that's it, gin of the month. Oh, we've just made the gin of the month, just printed the menus. Reprint the menus, we've got a new gin of the month. I found out later there was my mate's gin that he'd launched, which I didn't know that we put it out with gin of the month. That's another story. And then we were away. But then we didn't realise that this was the easy bit. The hard bit was distribution, and everything came after this, which we hadn't had any sort of foray into. So, we're taking beautiful images, and we still use that image to this day. We were the first distiller in Australia. So we were the 5th distiller in the state. There's now 55. So that was only 5.5 years ago. So we were the first distiller to actually show what's in our gin, because everyone else was like, you can't show it, someone else could make it and knock it off. And I said, well, no, I could give 1,000 people that, and they can't make the same gin. It's a recipe without the method and the art that goes into it. So, but I often say as a designer, if you can see it, you can taste it. And it's us hanging out with Stephen Marshall when he was the head of the South Australian Gin Appreciation Society that he created himself before he was premier. Our bathtub cut launch in the bathtub, which is now up there, old Cozzy. So you notice the amount of stock's growing on the shelf. we're slowly getting somewhere. So we had this little pop-up at the Central Markets. We did it for 3 months. It's still to this date the most profitable 3 months we've ever had in business. And we realised that if we can actually sell a product straight to consumers, maybe we've got a better business So that 3 months is what gave us the confidence to do this. And this was like proper then, like, it's not a hobby anymore. The wife said, I think you need a business plan now because you're now double mortgaging the house and you idiots aren't going to do that without a business plan. So when people ask me what is success, at that point I said success is a forklift. Because if we've got a forklift, it means that we have enough stuff to move around to need a forklift, and we're not in my bloody garage anymore. So you know, success at that point was it. So then when we moved in here and we got a forklift, it was like, right, okay, so what's next? And you know, what does success look like was a completely different answer. So this is where are we standing here? Like here in that photo. So just absolutely diabolical mess. That was the bar before we built it. It was a mechanics workshop originally and then a CrossFit gym. Yes, that's why in the men's toilets it says gym after work. I thought you said gym. That's the bar when we first opened. So then we're now 2.5 years into business before Mary arrived. So that was when we actually became distillers. Before that, we were building a brand to work out whether distilling was even the thing that we should be in. So we
did you end up distilling yourselves? Did you just learn how?
Yeah, we did learn. We also employed a distiller.
Yeah.
Like
the point in changing over from essentially rebadging some products?
Well, it's contract make. So what it is we create and own the recipe, and we put in an order with someone for our gin. You know, so there is definitely a really strong back and forth between us, because we'd get that gin and we'd taste it and go, it's not up to scratch. We're rejecting it. It needs to do this and this and this. So definitely different to if we went to like our beer, for example. We just chat with the guys at Little Bang. So we go through so much of your beer, I'm just going to stick my labels on it next time. They go, yeah, sure, that's fine. That's a different enterprise, you know. So that's more like sort of.
Yeah, so what made the decision to go from purchasing an ordering product to making the product?
Oh, we were always going to do it. No,
was
we
it
were
a
always
money
going to
thing
do
or a
it.
passion thing?
It's a passion thing, but it's more than anything. We had a business now that we were completely reliant on someone else. It was actually the biggest danger in our business at that point was we didn't make our own stuff. So it became the biggest risk to the business, not owning your own production. Like it's a huge problem. So we immediately felt much better about things when we 10-minute warning. Holy shit, I'm gonna have to hustle. Right, okay, cool. I knew I'd need that 10-minute warning. Okay, cool. So we're going to skip through really fast. So this thing came in with its Chinese instructions, and Wes and I actually built it ourselves, which is really quite scary in hindsight. This is us at events again. This is probably a showcase event. I don't know. You know, along the way we've created more and more products, and we've won lots and lots of awards. We've won probably close to 100 awards across every continent of the world except Antarctica. They don't have a gin awards program. But design awards as well, so we've won design awards for every one of those products around the world or around Australia. Then we took over a bar next door because we didn't have enough to do, so then it was going through the renovation process again. If you haven't been in there, it's worth a little wander in. So a cocktail focus, just something a bit different. We were going to do this in here, but there's too many of you. Then, you know, it's time to take it overseas. We thought we'll test run that on the Popeye first. So we still do masterclasses on the Popeye like every week, and it is a lot of fun. It's like what we do but on a boat, which is even fun. Even more fun. And the Popeyes, like they love us because it's relevant again. Like they really were struggling. They were really struggling. So then we got the first bit of government funding, like a tiny amount of money to help us do a bit of stuff overseas. So we launched into Singapore, and this was just pre-COVID. Me finally getting the chance to present to basically my gin mecca. Atlas Bar has 1,400 gins in its collection. It's got a 4-story high gin collection. So that a person's down here and they jump on this spiral staircase and on a ladder to get right to the very top. So if you look through the list and go, I'll have a Prohibition lights. I think we're lower down and more accessible now. Those opportunities start to come up, and we're now in more of the top bars in Singapore than we are in Adelaide, as a reflection of how the brand performs over there. Export is something that we're constantly growing. Part of that state government thing was a trade mission into Japan. This is me with my interpreter. Very hard to interpret some of the stuff I say at times, so she had her work cut out for her. And this is Japanese Johnny Walker. So we presented at the Tokyo Whiskey Festival. So we were one of the only gins in the whiskey festival, and just like so well received, which was great. And I'm not going to use the word pivot, but I just did. So COVID hits. What do? All of our bars get shut. We sack 2/3 of our workforce, because the best thing we can do for them, because we have no idea when we're ever going to open again. And then we employ them a week later because of this little thing. So one Sunday night, I just couldn't sleep, and I'd been joking over the weekend with my wife about, we can't buy sanitizer, we should just make it. We've got shitloads of alcohol, that's the main ingredient. We should just make it. And then I couldn't sleep, got up on Monday morning, 4 o'clock in the morning to 6 a.m. I came up with a way to make it, a business plan, a marketing plan, which was basically to give it away if you wanted to buy a bottle of gin, designed the packaging, worked out where we could get it all from so that we could have it on the market the next day. So that was Monday morning. By the time my wife got up, I said, we're doing sanitizer. She said, you joked about that on the weekend. I said, no, I'm serious, we're doing it. Here's my one sheeter. And yeah, it was literally 24 hours we had product starting to roll out. So we said, we'll do it sort of under the radar and no one will know about it. Next minute I was in the advertiser, and then we had to call the ATO and the TGA, because we're committing a federal law making hand sanitizer without approval, and by not paying $87,000 a litre in a vessel like that in tax, $87,000 1,000 litres, so $87 a litre in tax. You imagine who's going to pay that for hand sanitizer? One of those bottles would have had $9 in tax in it. So we asked for forgiveness, not permission, and then everyone in Australia got permission, which was good. So where we're standing now turned into a sanitizer factory. So we were making a shitload of sanitizer and a shitload of gin, to the point that our online sales from April 2019, now this is a fairly unfair stat, but April 2019 to April 2020 grew 3,600%. Like, it's a ridiculous number. But year on year was still pretty significant. So online sales growth of 504% from one year to the next. So we took our business that had very unsophisticated online capability to quite sophisticated and quite busy. And for us, it's been now about maintaining that. The other thing that happened during COVID is we inherited a coffee shop. So when your tenants up and move out on you, you go, do we rent it again or do we just do it? So 2.5 weeks to design a brand, buy a coffee machine, hire staff and be up and running. And we're making the coffee that you're trying today. Again, it was about creating a simple brand, doing simple coffee well, because it does have to reflect the brand. So where to now? We've sort of, beyond the forklift, I think we've got a new forklift, the old forklift died. But Matt Foz is now our Sydney brand. So we've got a brand ambassador here in Adelaide now that sells purely our products. So we've gone from just distribution to having our own sales reps out on the road selling our product, which is a big jump in this industry. And Matt's now based in Sydney. So we've got people pounding the pavement every day, moving Prohibition into venues in Sydney. We've been national for years, but when you just go through a distributor to do your sales, you're just not penetrating the market properly. So at some point you've got to take the risk and do it yourself. G&T happened during tail end of last year. That's just been ranged with Dan Murphy nationally through their Pinnacle system. So I think first order of that is 48,000 cans of gin and tonic. So in a market that's already quite saturated, so we're pretty happy to just slide in at the tail end of, because there won't be many more of these products they take on. And for us, it was about doing gin and tonic without compromise in a can. Festivals are starting all around Australia and the world, so that was Sydney a couple of weeks ago. I'm in Newcastle next week, and then we've got Melbourne. Like, it all sort of starts off again, and it is nice to be seeing people again. Like, it's nice to be interacting with people, because I often say the bit that I didn't sort of know that we were creating when we put some booze in a bottle was the joy thing. It was the interaction with people that get to enjoy it, and that will send you an email on a Friday afternoon and say, I'm sitting out after a really hard week of work enjoying your gin because it's my piece of sanity in the week. And it's that nice thing that you don't know that you're sort of signing up for. Okay, yeah, if I could tell you where it was going, like, we've got visions for where it could go, but we just don't know. I mean, our 2-year business plan we eclipsed in 3 months. So we thought we might be national, well, on the eastern seaboard in a couple of years, and we were fully national within 3 months. So it just sort of was a bit of a rocket. So we just pour a lot of gin and serve a lot of people in here and have a bit of fun with it. A couple of tips from me, because we're now on minus time. I reckon we've got a minute. We've got a minute. That's brilliant. That's right. We've got a minute. Okay. So, we've already talked about this, but it is like ridiculously good. So we launched into Australia as the most expensive gin Australia had ever seen, but we're still the most different bottle on the shelf. It's a total pain in the ass because it's big and it's bulky and it's heavy and it's expensive to ship and it's all those things, but it sells because of all those things. So definitely be different. Be relentless. I got this word from Stu Gregor from 4 Pillars, and it was sort of comforting. So 4 Pillars sold 50% of their business for 50 million last year to Lion Nathan. So they're a gin business, an Australian gin business, probably one of the bigger ones. And it was nice to hear him say how relentlessly exhausting it is and how you have to constantly be relentlessly moving forward, because if you're not, you're behind. So, we're in a particularly competitive industry. Every single day we're coming up with something new and working on something that's going to evolve the brand further. So whether it's further expansion, new products, it is a relentless pursuit of innovation and growth. Be bold. So, again, it's part of the be different thing, but it's be bold just in general. Like, what do you got to lose? You're going to lose more from being shy and retiring as a brand and as a person than you are from being bold. So don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to experiment with things that may not work, and have that culture in your business of mistakes aren't a problem. Mistakes are encouraged, because if you're not making mistakes, you're not taking risks, and you're not moving forward fast enough. I can guarantee you not if you're not making any mistakes. So be authentic. I mean, this is part of our brand pillar stuff and part of our values, but every business should be authentic, because it's the authentic part of your business that is the saleable bit. It's actually your USP, is your authenticity. And it is the why thing is in that authenticity piece. And do have fun. The whole point, I often say that if we're not having fun here, we shut the doors and we walk away. I almost haven't paid myself a paycheck in Prohibition since we started. So it's a 5-year business growth where every cent that we make, we funnel back into the growth of the business, and I pay 36 other people in this business before I pay myself, so I generally don't pay myself. But that's a choice, and I have a design business that can put some food on the table, thank God. But I think if we weren't having fun, we shut the doors and we walk away. But I think regardless of what industry you're in, I talked about the fact that if you're having fun, you're attracting people, you are fun to be around.